Welcome to The Power of Tax Defense Attorneys, Tax Corner with Juda Gabaie.
Hello and welcome to The Power of Tax Defense Attorneys, Tax Corner with Juda Gabaie. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Understanding Tax Relief Options. What are the different tax options that you have for individuals and businesses? Juda, welcome back.
Kevin, thank you so much for having me again on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about this because I have a business. I am an individual as well. So can you provide an overview of the main tax relief options available for individuals and businesses?
Yes. So, tax relief options is one thing that a lot of individuals and businesses inquire about. If an individual or business has some sort of tax liability, the question is, how do you get that tax liability resolved? How do you get it into resolution? And there are a few options. The most common known option is offer and compromise. It's a settlement. It's known as the Fresh Start Initiative. And that's something that, a lot of taxpayers are looking at because that's a settlement. They want to be able to settle their taxes with the government. Another option is something called a CNC status, stands for currently not collectible status. It's like a hardship status. Basically, you're telling the government, hey, I don't have the ability to pay. Please put me into a hardship status. And we can get into the details of that. And then the third option is a installment agreement. There's different types of installment agreement. There's a streamlined installment agreement. There's a partial pay installment agreement. So there's a lot of options out there. And the fourth option is, let's assume this liability is not correct. Can we do something called an audit reconsideration? Can we have the IRS reconsider, this audit? Maybe it wasn't done correctly, or maybe do an amended return. And another option is innocent spouse. Innocent spouse is, a spouse where they filed a joint return together, and that spouse is now stating that I shouldn't be responsible for my partner's liability. Because when you file a joint liability, you're both jointly and severally liable. And one spouse is like, I shouldn't be responsible for my spouse's liability. So there are options out there. I know I threw a whole bunch. The question is going to be which one fits for that individual taxpayer or the business.
So can you go over the criteria for these different tax relief programs?
Yes. So in terms of the criteria for the tax liabilities, how an individual or a business resolves it, it all depends on a few things. One is a financial. The financial will show what assets and equity that taxpayer has. The second thing that we have to take a look at is the liability. How much in question are we talking about? And then the third criteria is, are there other circumstances that we should be aware of, whether health or other issues that lead to believe that, this liability, why the IRS should consider that this liability should be resolved in some sort of resolution. So there are criteria for all of them. As a tax attorney, we'll have to take a look at all these criteria to see, which one the taxpayer qualifies for and which way to go.
How can individuals or businesses determine if they qualify for assistance? Are there resources they can look at? Is it best to talk to an attorney?
Yeah. So the best thing to do is obviously talk to a tax professional. All they do is specialize in this area. It's very important to take a look at what the tax liability is. When does the taxes expire? You have to take a look at the taxpayer's financial situation, their current financial situation right now, which is very important because that would determine, what the taxpayer's income and expenses are and what the taxpayer's assets are, because the government will take a look at these information in order to determine whether the taxpayer qualifies for a settlement or a hardship status.
What do people get wrong about tax relief?
One of the main things that people get wrong about tax relief is they believe that the government would automatically settle with everyone. The government is not in the business to incentivize taxpayers not to pay their taxes and then eventually settle with them. The government's goal is to collect the tax liability. And they have more power than your regular creditor out there because, once they send an IRS notices, they can, try to levy you without going to court or any of that stuff. They can levy, garnishment, lien without even going to court. Whereas a regular creditor will have to get a judgment before they try to levy or garnish you or lien you. So one of the main things the IRS, misconception is the government is not in the business to settle with everyone. The question is if you actually qualify to settle.
Why do you think people assume that just because, the government doesn't have time for all this stuff and all that? Is that what you think people get, why they get that wrong?
No, I think there's a lot of misconceptions advertisement out there that says that, the government is willing to settle with everyone. And that is one thing that people see, people read a lot on the internet. Myself, if I wasn't an attorney specializing in this area, I would think the same thing too. I would say, I owe the government, hundreds, if not millions of dollars. Why not settle with the government? I could give them something better. Maybe they'll never collect the money from me. So I could understand where, taxpayers are getting their reasoning from. But, one of the things I usually make very clear to my clients is that, we'll take a look. If you qualify for a settlement, we would love to help you with that. But there's a criteria.
Yeah, the government can't just settle with everybody, or else they'll get that reputation, and everyone will be wanting to settle.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Can you explain the negotiation process for resolving tax debts?
Yeah. So there is depending on which resolution you qualify for. One of the most important thing is we want to take a look at the liability, right? We want to take a look at the statute of limitation of the liability. Federal taxes have a statute of limitation of 10 years. Generally, there are some exceptions to prolonging that statute of limitation. We want to take a look at the individual's financial to see what their income and expenses are. And then we also want to take a look at the taxpayer's compliance history, make sure the taxpayer is in compliance. Once these are all in place, then at that point, we'll do a strategy call with the taxpayer to discuss, okay, which is the best negotiation, which is the best route process to get your case resolved with the IRS or the state.
Are there any particular approaches that you found to be most effective, without giving away your trade secrets, of course?
There's no one set approach. One thing is for sure is that if you qualify for any of the resolutions, we will put a compelling reasoning together to have the IRS accept that resolution, whether it be a settlement, which is an offer in compromise, whether it be a payment plan or a hardship status. There's no one set approach, but putting a compelling reason together is important.
What should individuals and businesses consider before proceeding with tax relief options?
One of the most important thing is to be in compliance with your current taxes. If you're not in compliance, we lose leverage. The IRS or the state will not discuss any resolution until you're in compliance. And I can't stress that enough. It's very important in order to be in compliance, in order to get into a resolution. Taxpayers come with us that when they're not in compliance, we'll work with them to get them into compliance, and then we'll work with them to put them into a resolution. So we have taxpayers that come to us with being not in compliance for a decade or more, and we'll work in putting them into compliance. And then at that point, once they're in compliance, we'll get an updated financial, and then we'll talk about a resolution.
And in this context, when you say compliance, do you just mean actually paying your taxes?
No, it actually means when I say compliance, means actually filing your tax returns.
Oh,
And then
okay.
if you have any tax liabilities that are going to occur in the future, you are in compliance with that. So what do I mean by that? For example, if right now you have to file a tax return that's due in a few weeks, make sure that return gets filed and paid, or make an estimated tax payment to show the government that you're stopping the bleeding. Same thing with businesses, right? If the business has a liability, they should make sure that that liability, that future liability that is paid, the federal tax deposit for the payroll tax has been paid, because that shows the government that you're stopping the bleeding.
Someone comes to you looking for help with tax relief. How does your firm assist them navigating the complexities?
So when an individual or a business comes to our office to get an understanding of how we can help to navigate these complexities, it all depends on what the issue is. So I'll give you an example. We have a client of ours that comes to us and hasn't filed tax returns in a long time. And when you don't file a tax return, both the federal and the state will file an estimate return on your behalf. And when they do that, we want to fix up those estimates. And in order to fix up those estimates, we do something called an audit reconsideration, where we tell the government, hey, those tax returns that you did on behalf of the taxpayer is incorrect. Reconsider the audit. And generally, those estimates, not only is it higher, but the government is already starting to take collection action. So we'll try to get a hold on collection. We'll try to get their liability reduced by filing the actual return. And then at that point, we'll work with the taxpayer to get them into a resolution if there's a liability. So every case has their own way of a resolution. Every case is different, but every taxpayer with a liability or with not a compliant or that are not in compliance always has a resolution. The question is going to be what that resolution is going to be. And we will know more once we take a look at that taxpayer's case.
What's the longest you've seen someone was behind?
I've seen people have not filed in 20, 30 years. I've seen
What? Oh my
I,
God.
generally,
Wow.
generally, the IRS will tend to assign a revenue officer, a revenue agent to that case. But
Yeah.
sometimes, taxpayers fall through the crack, and the IRS never gets around to doing it. So I've seen 20, 30 years at least of individuals or even sometimes businesses that haven't filed. But eventually, the IRS will come around, taking a look at that individual or business case. And it's just a matter of time, and that's why I
Right.
always tell my clients it's better to be proactive, because when you're not proactive, the government is on the offense, and you're not even playing defense. And now you have to go back and undo everything that the government has done. And that's something, the more action the government takes, the more time consuming it takes, the more stuff that the tax attorney has to do on your behalf in order to undo whatever the government has done. So it's important to try to have an attorney right away start working on your case, on your tax matter, in order to avoid all these collection actions and enforcement action. Failure to file a tax return could be a criminal element. So it's very
Mhm.
important to try to get these resolved as soon as possible.
Well, in your experience, what is it mostly an inability to pay? Is it just laziness? Is it just I don't file taxes? Like what is the typical reason?
I've seen many, but I would say the top ones are, individuals have or the businesses have a lot going on in their life, and they just never got a chance at doing it. And sometimes they're very successful. They just never got around to do it. I've seen where individuals or businesses paid their withholding, and they're thinking that, okay, I paid the withholding tax. I don't need to file. The government has my money. I've seen a lot of times where there's a death in the family or a family dispute, and the tax return doesn't get filed, or there's a divorce, and that could have an effect on the filing. So I've seen it go a lot of ways, and eventually the tax has to get resolved. It's just a matter of time. The question is going to be when it happens.
Mhm. And how deep you are in at that point.
Right.
Yeah. Aside from the traditional tax relief options that we've discussed, are there alternative strategies that taxpayers could explore to manage liabilities?
There are alternative resolution like tax relief options, but it's very new. It's very detailed. For example, bankruptcy could be an option, but there's a waiting period, and it's not so simple.
Mhm.
Some taxes are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. The alternative strategies that I always tell my taxpayer is to be in compliance. Because if you show that you're stopping the bleeding, that's the biggest deal. That's your leverage, because that's what you're telling the government. Hey, I made mistakes in the past. Moving forward, as you can see, the tax return that's due. So those are important, because that shows the government that you have stopped the bleeding, and now we're going to address the older liabilities or the older years that have not been filed.
I would imagine that it could be somewhat embarrassing for people, or they don't want to, as far as like hiring an attorney, obviously you don't seem like a real judgmental person. Do you have to like tell people like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm not here to judge. Let's just fix this. Do people kind of come in with their tail between their legs?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of taxpayers are worried about that. But I've been doing this for a decade, so I've seen everything in the book. And what I tell my taxpayers is, our goal as a firm is to get you into a resolution. That's our goal. We're not here, to take a look at judging and all that, because
Hmm.
we have seen it all, and our goal is to get our clients into a resolution and send them on their way and not have this issue again. We would love to keep these cases all civil, not turn into criminal. And the resolution is the best part of it. I mean, if we can help a taxpayer that hasn't filed in years, or has an audit, or has estimate returns by the government, and we're able to put them into a resolution, that works for both the taxpayer and the taxing authorities, then that's the best that you can get. So
Absolutely.
that's something that, we always look forward in doing.
Yeah, the peace of mind that you get from finally having
Well,
that off your plate, I can't even imagine.
the peace of mind is the biggest deal. Many taxpayers will tell me after our first like second or third appointment, they'll be like, the peace of mind that you brought to me, it means everything, because now I can get a good night of sleep.
Mhm.
Or I got an email today from a taxpayer telling me that I cannot believe where I was a year ago to where I am right now. I never thought that this would get resolved, and I'm thankful for you guys. And I just got this email today. He said, I'm thankful for you guys. I'm happy to have this resolution. And it means so much because now moving forward, I'm not worried about my taxes. I know that we can, that I'm going to be in good hands and all taken care of. So that means a lot because, that was a worry that this person had for years, not for 1 or 2 years, for a decade, had this
Mhm.
worry and no longer has that worry. Imagine having a worry for a decade. And now after, hiring our office after a year and no longer having that worry, that's a big relief.
Absolutely. I can't I can't even imagine. But yeah, that would be a huge relief for sure. All right. Well, thanks for listening to The Power of Tax Defense Attorneys Tax Corner with Juda Gabaie. To connect with Juda, visit reliabletaxattorney.com. And don't forget to leave us a comment, like, and subscribe to our channel. Juda, always great chatting with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me on. Pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.